You are live.
Good morning. I now call this meeting of the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government to order. I would first ask Executive Director Berlin to discuss the particulars of the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. This meeting is being held pursuant to notice in accordance with the provisions of the state's open meetings law and executive law section 94. Both the meeting room that we're using here at the Commission's offices at 540 Broadway in Albany and the Commission's conference room at its office at 25 Beaver Street in Manhattan are open to the public during public session. And we'll note that one of our commissioners, Commissioner Austin, will be attending by video conference pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 103-A, and the Commission's rules and resolution for remote participation on account of extraordinary circumstances. And I can confirm that between the New York and Albany offices, we do have a quorum of commissioners present for the meeting.
Thank you. So the first item of business is approval of the minutes of the public session on May 14, 2025. Before we take a vote on approval of minutes, are there any additions or amendments that anyone wants to speak?
On behalf of the chair, I'll make note of the fact that there's a typographical error on page 12 of the public session minutes. First paragraph, second line, the word mother should be other. Drop the M.
Yeah.
Please.
What?
Although my mother wrote a song once, there's no other like your mother. That's another story.
So with that amendment, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So,
Mr. Edwards?
second.
Mr. Rowland, I can second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. The next item of business is a report from the staff, the operations update. I'll turn it over to Executive Director Berlin.
Thank you, Chair James. The operations update is under tab B in the agenda book for today's meeting. As we have been doing consistently for the past year and a half, the operations report includes information for the most recently completed month, May of 2025, the preceding month, the corresponding month in 2024, year-to-date 2025, and then comparable period in 2024. All commissioners' attention to the first page, investigations and enforcement. You will see that we received 15 tips, complaints, and referrals. In May, you received notice of those in your weekly notifications. One new investigation was opened. You received notice of that as well in the notifications. And a total of 10 matters were closed. 4 continued matters and 6 colored matters, including 1 carried over investigation. No guidance letters were authorized in May. Ending pending, as you can see, is still 211 pending matters and 52 open investigations. That's a net overall change of positive 4. So open and pending together constitute 259 matters. The number of matters that the investigation enforcement unit is continuing to grow compared with the comparable period in 2024. See, we've had over a 20% increase in the number of complaints that are coming in. So, continued growth, continued docket, and we move on. Next page, unless there are any questions. Ethics Advice and Guidance Unit, another record month for total inquiries. That's for guidance received by the unit, 156, which exceeds last month, which was a record time. We are running way substantially ahead of last year, which itself was a record year. So we're at 717 received so far. We had a 60% increase, 24 of 23. And now we're seeing almost a 50% increase in over 24. So the number of guidance requests continues to come in. As we've observed before, we think one of the likely drivers of that is the continuing ethics education that the agency is administering to the entire executive workforce. We think that's having a substantial impact on the number of inquiries we're getting in. And likewise, it's probably impacting because of greater sensitivity to the requirements, in particular, of public officers law. More complaints and tips coming in to the agency as well. Just kind of coincidentally, commissioners do see it's confidential requests coming in under Part 931, requests for approval of agency heads to receive, to accept reimbursement expenses for official activities. The unit is making some revisions to the form that's being used to provide some clarification. So you'll see that in some of the transmissions that come through. Can't talk about specific matters. They're confidential, obviously. But the form is public and it has been revised. There's some other ideas that we're working on, like making those forms into web fillable forms. And eventually, with the goal, longer term, of having a database actually populated as the requests come in to improve the ability to track and stay on top of those. And I will say that the unit is continuing to respond in a very, very timely fashion to all the requests. So things are moving forward very, very smoothly and expeditiously. Any questions? Anything to add? Staff. Next page, page 3. Lobby. Still in the first half of the first year of the biennial period, so 6 months out of 24, numbers continue to grow. As you can see, number of individual and principal lobbyists is now over 7,700. It's an increase of 223. Over the April numbers, number of clients is increasing, has increased. Numbers of registration amendments and registrations have continued to increase month over month. The numbers are quite robust. The unit did, in cooperation with our communications group, put out recently a bi-monthly report reflecting the March and April figures, which are continuing to grow. A higher number than first bi-monthly report. It's an innovation that's been introduced this year. It's gotten some public attention, and it's, we think, a very useful document to have out there. We'll continue to do those every 2 months. Takes a little bit of time to generate it. Filers have until the middle of the following month to get their submissions in. There's a grace period after that. So several weeks after the bi-monthly period closes out, we can run the data in a preliminary way and get it out to the public, to the press. It's been a terrific innovation, especially as the numbers are going up. As we talked about before, we'll talk about it a little bit later on. 2024 was a record year for lobbying spend. And certainly the numbers so far, the first 2 bi-monthly periods, appear to be suggesting that certainly the numbers are going to stay up there. Spend is continuing to go up.
This is the report that's in our books behind tab G.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's nice.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Lobbying inquiries remain high. As you can see, they continue to grow. It's bi-monthly reporting month. In May, 5,734. It's large number. The group is right on top, so it's impressive. Moving forward, as we plan, and with the kind of staff, and we'll talk about it a little bit more as well. Anything to add, Carol? We'll come back and talk a little bit more about the annual and the minor figures. Next page, financial disclosure. The monthly count in May, which included the deadline for filing, was substantial. Interestingly, more filings came in April than in May. We're running quite ahead, and it appears that there are more filings this year than we had last year, financial disclosure filers. So they fall into two categories. We have policymakers and we have threshold filers. You see the numbers are up. The outstanding filings are also substantial, greater than the prior year, over 4,200 outstanding filings at this point. The good news, if you look at the footnotes, is that 2023 financial information, which was due last year, 2024, with two deadlines, the May 15th deadline for the non-academic filers, the largest group, and then the November 15th deadline for academic filers. So there are two groups of filings that the agency is working on, that the unit is working on. Last year, there were over 7,000 failure to file notices that went out. Of all the filings that took place last year, and it's over 34,000. The number outstanding with delinquency notices as yet for last year's filings for 2023 financial information, some find confusing, is down to 39. 39 out of over 35,000 due. It's not good that there are 39 still out there. Not everybody can be tracked down. Some of the individuals who haven't filed, we will eventually learn, were candidates for state office who didn't know they were on the ballot. At least that will be what we will be told. There are others who have left the workforce, and Melinda Funk can give you a texture on that if anyone has any questions. But the ultimate percentage of compliance is quite high. But a huge amount of it is going into tracking these down. We'll talk a little bit later on in the agenda about things like labor prospects, all that. But the unit is putting very substantial resources into tracking down these individuals and getting them to file. Ultimately, they're extremely successful. A fraction of a percent, that's standard, but nonetheless, a lot of effort goes into it. Any questions? Next page, page 5. Training. Overall, and in footnotes, we're making progress. Our total from inception, working against our end of this year deadline for everyone in the workforce and the executive branch workforce to complete 2 trainings. Overall, we can account for 406,000 plus trainings. The number may be higher. As I said last time, because our meetings are occurring last month before the deadline for ethics officers and trainers to get their statistics in. This month, the book went out well before the deadline, which was this past Monday. So we're only looking at 4,000 total trainings having completed. That number undoubtedly will grow as the data comes in. But to hit our target, which is 660,000 completed, we have had to hit 27,500 trainings a month. We're running well under that. Staff is looking at a variety of ways to get that number up. We're going to have a colloquium with ethics officers to again impress upon them the importance of having the trainings completed. As I've said before, we need to have greater utilization of our on-demand ethics refresher. More than a majority of the individuals who remain to be trained and take the on-demand because the preponderance of trainings up to now have been live trainings. And the way the cycle works is 1 year live training, following year on-demand refresher. staff has come up with, and if there's time, we'll do a little demonstration, a way to help us push farther out the on-demand. Right now, the on-demand is available on OERs, Office of Employee Relations, chambers, executive chambers, learning management system in a format that's specific to learning management systems. Some of the SUNY and CUNY campuses have systems that can run it. Most agencies don't, and some 40% of state agencies are not within the OER realm. They don't have access to SLMS. We do have a contract out with a unit at Rockefeller College that is working on converting the module that we now have on the SLMS system, the on-demand module, to something that will run on any system, on a website. It's going to take some time for them to do the formal conversion. And that's the version of the on-demand that has section by section quizzes. You have to complete the quiz. You have to successfully answer the questions, get lots of prompts, but you can't finish it until you get it to the end of that. That's going to take some months for the conversion to be completed. In the meantime, our training staff is putting together an MP4 version of that. It has accessibility features in it. It will have closed captioning. It will have voiceover. It will have the slides. Much like those are lawyers who do continuing legal education. In the course of the video, there will be a code produced. We're working with, staff is working with ITS to create a form, a web form that will pop up at the end of the completion of the course, so that the user can provide a certification, which will then come to us and go to agency ethics officers. We're going to seek your approval to use that module in the interim until we have the formal conversion completed by the vendor. Yep.
You said that this project involving Rockefeller, it'll take some time. Do you even have a tentative time frame? Are we talking the last quarter of this year? Or are we talking sometime in the next calendar year, sometime in the next fiscal year? Do you have any?
No, it's in this fiscal year. We trimmed the contract down in order to accelerate it, but we don't have a firm timetable from them. It could well be we won't have it till the fall. We would like to have it before then, but it's a fairly complicated conversion. As it turns out, we're doing a conversion that will allow the user to use the module literally on any device.
When you say we won't have something until the fall, you're talking about the actual conversion or the timeline for the conversion?
No, the conversion.
Oh, okay.
The conversion.
The fall of this year.
Fall of this
Oh,
year.
okay. Thank you.
But it's fairly common. It's going to be a terrific thing when it's done because it will be testing you on your phone, and that will open that on-demand up to lots of individual users. Another thing that will boost the numbers is we have an agreement now, MOU with the MTA, getting their data into the system, their employee data, their a union represented individuals, so over 50,000 individuals. And MTA has told us they will have put all of those employees complete the training by the end of the year. So that will bring another 50,000 plus individuals into the system.
Commissioner Harris has a question.
Yes, it's about the on-demand numbers, year to date this year versus last year. Why the difference?
The answer, and it's not very satisfying, it's underutilization.
Even compared to last year?
Yeah, compared to last year, it's not being utilized as well as it should be. And part of that undoubtedly reflects the fact that some 40% of agencies don't have access to the on-demand because it's on the SLMS system. And that's why it's crucial for us to have other modalities available. And that's why I want to get started right away. The other nice thing about this interim module that we're proposing is if it works the way we want it to work, we can literally provide email links to employees, and agencies can provide links, so you just click on it, take it right to the module. It's much the way the ethics training for lobbyists works. It can run on our system, and there's some costs associated with web hosting. And we're going to see if we have the ability to avoid those costs.
Did we have help sort of pushing the on-demand on agencies last year that were not, I mean, I know last year was sort of, we wanted the entire workforce trained by the end of the year. Were agencies sort of pitching in and ethics officers that, we could sort of get them to continue doing that?
Yes, that is why we're having a colloquium. It's a heavy lift. No, the agencies, we have to give them a huge amount of credit. Our staff is doing a very substantial amount of work doing trainings themselves. Last year, I think the total was over 18,000 that our staff trained. Our classes, we're doing the classes are not filling up. We're not getting the enrollments in the classes. The on-demand is underutilized. That probably is partly explained, maybe in large measure explicable by the fact that we're getting down to the agencies that don't have access to it. So the answer is yes, we need to have the agencies and their personnel making sure that their employees are taking the training.
So, following up on Commissioner Harris's question. So do you attribute the diminution in on-demand training to the fact that last year, 38,000 was for agencies that had access to this only?
It had to be agencies that had access,
And
because
this
otherwise
year-
they couldn't reach it. Yeah.
So most of the agents that had SLMS, the availability to their training last year?
We can't say that. Can't say that. But certainly, but those who were able to push, the individuals that had access, not everybody works in an office and sits at a computer terminal. We have agencies, MTA is a good example, with lots of individuals, but they're not office workers. There's alternative needs. So it very much looks as if part of it, and probably the larger part of it, is individuals who took it previously with those who had more ready access to it. But we also think we need more pushing by the agencies themselves. And we have a number of systems in mind. The good reports, or quarterly reports, which go to legislative leadership, to the governor, are published. The annual report discloses in pretty fine detail which agencies are performing and which aren't. And we do have strategies in mind to get leadership in agencies, particularly those that are quote underperforming, get the attention of leadership to get these trainings done. But we also want to make sure they have the needs, and that's why training staff has increased the number of trainings. Talk about it in a minute. We're increasing. We have a trainer position we're recruiting for, another training assistant as well. Get our numbers up. But the courses have to be fully enrolled. People have to be taking the courses.
Any other questions? Okay.
We'll see, and again, I mean, I have to say this year we're going to improve. We have the final numbers in at the end of the calendar year. We'll make some assessments.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say what's working, what isn't working, what more needs to be done. We'll be getting more input from the agencies themselves on what their challenges are. We did, as you know, survey all the agencies. As part of the comprehensive review process, we're addressing concerns they expressed. But their concerns also include not necessarily having all the resources they would like the agency to do their part in carrying out training.
Do you have a date for program?
Don't. We're looking at September, sooner than that. We will, but most likely September. We don't think it will be as effective if we do it open Sunday. But we have lots of needs. We're actively looking at communications, fidelity, getting information. And again, it's going to be terrific. If the commission approves the interim approach we have, we will be able to provide those who haven't completed the courses, and agencies will be able to provide those who haven't completed the on-demand course directly into the system. And we're expecting that to have a big impact on the numbers. So we won't let them do it. Next page, page 6, audit and review. We are on target to hit our current goal. We're typically looking at reaching or exceeding a total of 2,000 combined targeted and random reviews of financial disclosure statements, and a like number of random lobbying audits. That's pretty much our capacity at the moment. We're actively recruiting for another auditor on the lobbying audit side. We actually have an offer out, waiting to hear back. That will give us increased capacity on that side. You will see that we did this last month, we did it again this month. Audits culminate in findings, which can involve amendments, filings on the lobbying side, reviews of financial disclosure statements, produce rails, requests for additional information letters that go out. You can see that the percentage of findings against the number of audits that are conducted of lobbying filings and reviews of financial disclosure statements is relatively high. In some months, we'll see the half of the reviews or producing findings and amendments to filings. I think it's an extremely important function. We want to get those numbers up. But we are on target. As mentioned before, there's new software that the unit is using. We're expecting that will give them greater facility in the work that they do. But over time, we want to grow the unit even more and have the capability of doing more audits. I think that would be a best practice for this commission to follow.
So the target of 2,000, is that based upon the current staffing, or you expect it to increase with the addition of the audit?
We should be able to increase the numbers with the addition. That should go up. Longer term, we want to introduce longer term, we want to introduce some automated systems for doing first pass reviews of lobbying filings and financial disclosure statements. To help us target what we do. There may be some legislative proposals in that. The statutes in some respect drive what we can do with capacity. It's the other drive. On the lobbying side, we can only do statutory random reviews. And in fact, the random review process we use has to be, the selections have to be made by an outside entity, and their compliance with this requirement in turn has to be audited. And same thing on the financial disclosure statement. You have targeted reviews for certain state officials, and then we have the random selected. In election years, targeted reviews take up a good deal of our capacity. And so we want to be able to, on that side as well, increase our capability. And that means growing that group. Any other questions? And finally, we have communications. As you know, communications handles records access or FOIL requests. More came in May, substantially more than in April. Got more responses out than before. And the unit is also responsible for all of our outward communications across the breadth of the agency. And so they're involved in some of the communicating we want to do on the training side. On the lobbying side, where notifications are going out, information is going out, they're helping with that, helping with the trainings. You can see that our website use continues to grow. I'm not sure exactly how we can necessarily identify unique users. That's fairly complicated. But year to date, it's over 200,000 uses of the website. 3 e-blast newsletters went out. Media outreach has been robust. Lots of posts, lots of followers, over 800, and impressions, which I believe are basically hits, actually using video page, over 2,600. So the group is quite active. Emily DeSantis, who's in charge of all of our communications needs and public affairs. Anything to add?
We just went up because of the FDS filing in May. I think that's why we saw more, but we're down from last year because it was an election year for the legislature. So we're seeing an increase when it's an election year for the candidate.
Thank you. No questions. Budget update.
Let's move on to the budget update.
It's under tab C. As you know, a budget request was met this year. So we're in good shape financially. We continue to have the delta between the appropriation and cash, which is its own kind of beast, and we've talked about it before. This year, the overall delta is about 4%. We'll try to stay within the cash, but the appropriation is there if we need it. It's going to be an interesting year to see how it plays out. The cash projections were based on full staffing. We still have, and we'll talk about it in a minute, we still have a number of positions and that we're actively recruiting for. So the cash out the door is not going to be running at the predicted rate. It's going to be a little bit lower than that until we can fill the vacancies. So you'll see that the delta between appropriation and cash has declined from last month. It was over 100,000. Now it's down to 76 and change, and that will continue to come down. We have some expenditures that we put in into the forecast that we may not be incurring. The language conversions, we've done some of the conversions already. We're going to have to titrate the conversions we do for the various materials we put out, versions of the training, and so on. And so we'll have some savings there. But overall, we're on target. We should be doing well this year. And then you'll some of the boluses that you see in the quarterly projections going out reflect those kinds of things. $250,000 in our budget was specifically permissively allocated for us to use to pay off an old legal fee obligation of the prior agency of JCO. And so the legislature authorized to use up to $250,000 and gave us the additional $250,000 to pay off that bill. That's somewhat in excess of the balance, which is 84, 86. It's in that realm.
Yes, 184 and machine.
So we actually have additional money there over and above the appropriation we asked for. And that will come in very handy, particularly for some of the expenditures. We'd like to be looking at procurements we want to do, systems, improvements in system acquisitions. Questions?
Yes, sir. What do you think?
Well, I'll just refer to it. It's posted online. Per diem payments for the February and March commission meetings and for the administration and legislative committee meetings in March were paid on June 4th. And the year-to-date total is the total on that page under tab D, that's $12,580.68. Prep time is still being processed
Yes.
for those meetings. The commission will work under the per diem resolution. But these have been paid out and they've been posted. And the recruiting update, we have now filled the 11 positions previously talked about. We have filled 4 of them. We have hired a new confidential investigator who's sitting in the New York office, which basically exhausts our office space in New York. He will be starting in July, and we'll introduce him at the July meeting. We have a new enforcement counsel, very experienced prosecutor, who will be joining us in August. She will be in Albany, very much looking forward to having both of them on our staff. And we'll be very welcome in augmenting the capabilities of the unit. We still have one vacancy in that unit. In a support role, Brian Wonder, Director of Investigation and Enforcement, is working on defining the description for that position. And once we have that finalized, we'll go out and recruit, and we hope to fill that quickly. And we're out of space in New York, so our recruiting opportunities will be focused on the Albany area. For essentially all the other positions we're going to be filling now going forward. We also have an offer outstanding to a compliance auditor. It's a position we talked about. Hoping to fill that very quickly. We have an approved BDA.
That's for Albany?
In Albany. That will have to be in Albany. We have approval now through budgets, or put through budget. A new assistant filing specialist in the lobbying group. I don't know if we have a starting, do we have a starting date for her yet? So ready to get a starting date. Right. Very much looking forward to that. A welcome addition to the group. We are actively interviewing for another training associate in the training unit, another administrative assistant in that unit, filing specialist position on the FDS side of the operation. We'll have some discussions about that at the staffing level. We have some open filing specialist positions in lobbying, and our administrative unit is recruiting for another administrative assistant to fill out that unit. Anybody who's interested, please refer them. Positions are all posted on the website. And we're doing lots and lots and lots of interviewing and lots of interest. It's actually nice to see how many resumes are now flowing in to the agency.
Thank you.
Since February.
Since February. It's had an understanding. But they are coming in. And I think for a number of reasons, there's increased interest among individuals coming out of school, in other positions, in working for state government. I think it's a welcome place and a good place to be right now. And we think we're a great agency, a great place to work. Next, we have the legislative update under tab E. Session is over. We made a lot of progress. We'll call it progress. We're declaring victory. Lots of bills introduced Some voted on, one passed the Senate. It's an incremental process. We've now had the opportunity to make our case for each of our legislative proposals to each of the relevant committees and their leadership and their staffs. And so we're looking forward to next year. And I think we may, as we go through it, as we go through the comprehensive review process, as we go through our next public hearing, undoubtedly we'll have additional initiatives that we'll want to advance. Any questions? Emily, anything to add?
The progress is incremental, so bills that like get out of committee, for instance, this year will be some of the first bills to get out of committee next year. So even though they might have taken a few months this year, next year it'll probably be like in January or early February that they get out of committee, which means we have more time to try to get them onto the floor, which is great. We did have our first bill passed, which was the electronic lobbying filing, so that's like, yay. That's progress, so that again will probably be passed next year. So we made really good headway in the Senate. On the Assembly side, it's been a little bit tougher. And the Assembly typically is a little slower moving bills. So we're going to still target the Senate. We did meet with the Assembly member there and, heard some feedback on some things and why some things weren't moving. So we're going to work on that. But in some instances too, it's just waiting to get the signal to call it up. So we're hopeful next year we'll make more progress in the Assembly.
So it looks like the physical access bill, maybe that'll come up early on.
Next year, I think it will because the OML is up. So we knew it wasn't going to advance in the Assembly this year. They said we need to wait till it's up again and see if there's an OML package that's going to come with it. And if it is, they said this will be included. So
Right,
yeah.
I think the current provision expires June of 2020.
Yes. Yeah, I believe. So they'll have to do something next year. So
Okay.
that'll be early, but they got out of committee in the Senate this year, which is
I
great.
see that.
So so it'll pass early and we can just focus on the Assembly. We've really had great support in the Senate. And in the Assembly, we have support there too, but they work a little different.
Yeah, I mean, the measures and support we got, I think on the budget, at the end of the day, in terms of where, not to say that our legislative initiatives aren't important, because they are, and each of them is important. But without the budget, the amendments are interesting, but many of them
Yes,
entail
That's true. Right.
more work, which is welcome, but we need the budgetary support, and we got that from both houses and from the chamber, and that's where we really made headway, and that's where a good deal of our focus at the end of the day. But we would have liked to have had everything passed. Keith?
And as I did last year, a little forecasting here, I hope to have ready for you at next month's meeting, sort of compilation of not just our own legislation, but other bills that I've been tracking that either impacts or relates to interests that the commission has with respect to our overall mission. So I've been tracking a few dozen bills that I'll give you the status of next month.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, because there are a number of proposals that were being circulated in each chamber that had the potential to substantially impact our work.
So did any of them pass both houses?
No.
Okay.
But I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But we'll know for sure next month.
Okay.
But like some of the ones that we thought might pass, like the lobbying on appointments didn't pass the
Right.
Assembly, right? So,
Correct.
that was one that passed 2 years ago.
But at the end of the day, at the last minute, a lot of legislation
Right.
goes through.
And the Assembly only finished their session late last night, so.
That's when the governor vetoed 2 years ago.
Yes, yes.
I didn't hear that.
The governor vetoed that about 2 years ago when it didn't pass.
Oh,
both houses.
this was.
Yeah, I mean, it had some other provisions. We had concerns about the retroactivity.
Yeah.
That would have just
And it
created
took it out, right?
Yes.
substantial
Still, and then
confusion
it just never went
in the
in.
work that we do.
So I guess
The
I'm
budget
assuming that
pushed everything back.
the bill that passed in the Senate Actually, there was, it did not include retroactivity.
It did not,
They didn't.
not the version of this.
They're saying.
I have a sense of, since it passed, I guess I have a sense of why it didn't get any traction this year.
The budget took a lot of time out of when they would normally have to consider bills because it was over a month late. So it left them less time to consider other bills. The assembly actually extended their session by 2 days because of that. Every year there's something.
Well, that opens a lot of, on the nominations and confirmations, we counted, what, over 250 positions annually.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of positions come before the Senate by, I guess by motion, not resolution, and that's complicated for
I
some.
know many people lobby on it. I mean, but I guess it was pretty. I'm sure Michael would have been pleased.
Hmm.
The next
That's right.
item
They got attention.
is the 2024 annual report.
That's great.
Uh,
Yeah.
Everybody's seen that. Got a fair amount of attention.
Nicely done.
It's a very impressive
Yeah.
document.
Easy to look at.
Backslapping here, but staff, I mean, the two things to observe about it. One, it's, as a report, it speaks very well of the agency and the work that we've done. And it's a very accessible document. It answers almost any question anybody can have about the work that we do and sets it forth very
In a
well.
way that's.
But it also shows how much work staff is doing and how much we got done, notwithstanding the fact that throughout 2024, we had that litigation hanging over our head. And the questions that were vetted in that litigation about the agency. And it supports suggests for executive summary. But a good deal of press attention. Emily, anything to say about that? The attention that received?
No, we worked with a couple reporters to get the stories and it worked out well. So we're pleased with that. I think changing the focus, because we put the lobbying numbers out before and then changing the focus of the news release away from that helped.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah,
We changed the focus of the news release away from the lobbying numbers, which isn't really about us, right? That's about the lobbying industry, because we've already reported on those numbers preliminarily, and I think that helped drive some coverage.
And call your attention to pages 11 through 13. We talk about the commission accomplishments. A really good capsule summary
Yeah.
of what we've done. And I know there's some discussion about sort of getting past the 31st of December in the report. I think it's important that there be current information in everything we put out. And the last page of the summary has a list of commission priorities for 2025.
I just wanted to say, I don't know if we're going to cover this.
So
somewhere
there's going to
else.
be a sequel. That's okay.
But I was particularly interested in the lobby compliance, that little snafu, you know.
Yeah.
like- And it seemed, was it a mistake only on someone's part, or was it, because it seems to be resolved kind of quickly.
It's work that we do every year, just this year was highlighted, which is
Yeah.
great.
Uh-huh.
So there might be, a lobbyist says $100,000 in compensation, the client says 50.
I get right, that's right.
Vice versa,
Yeah,
or
okay.
perhaps the client didn't report an expense and the lobbyist did.
Yeah, okay.
And we go down, Amy Nicotera really spends a lot of time doing that.
It's not a
The
program
highest
that just-
discrepancies down to the lower ones.
It's not a program where does it, you go through the numbers.
The program identifies it, so we
Okay.
did a report that identifies it, but Amy does all the help.
There's a discrepancy
Wow.
report that teases it out. But it's not just numbers. I mean, it can, in some instances, there's activity going on that's not being reported,
Unregistered, yeah.
that the public's not seeing. And so, the numbers are eye-catching because they can be fairly low. But there's stuff going on that should be in the reports, and that's the whole point of lobbying regulation and reporting.
I'm
get the
sure there'll be a lot more
information
coordination going on between what the
Oh, I think so. I think so,
Yeah.
for sure. Yes,
Yeah.
I had some conversations with some folks who I pointed out the whole purpose of doing this was so that people would double check their filings before they file and make sure they're accurate. And they agreed that was important. End of the conversation.
Nicely done.
And it shows that we're watching.
Yeah, yeah.
So the better compliance, at least among those.
We
Who found
highlighted issues. Yes, for sure. For sure.
Well, I mean, there was some pushback from some individuals, but
No, but at the end of the day, they
The
came
file-
around once we explained.
yeah, but the filings are the filings and they have to be careful. But they also have to make sure they're disclosing what they're supposed to disclose.
Someone is looking.
And, you know, until we look at it, we don't know. And it's one of the double checks on the system. And we
Yeah,
have,
it shows we are actively looking though.
Yeah.
and we're not just comparing numbers, we're looking at a lot of other sources of information. So there's a lot more going on. But it's good, it got attention. But again, the report is, it's a phenomenal report, it speaks very well of the agency.
Well, it's clear that the agency has done a great deal of work in the past year, and I also want to commend Emily and the staff for the annual report, which really comprehensive.
Yeah.
Very good.
Next item is, talk a little bit about the preliminary bi-monthly lobbying data that we're putting out based, now every 2 months based on bi-monthly reports. The next report will also include, these are the lobbyists filing their bi-monthly reports. Twice a year, clients file their semi-annual reports. And that's sort of where the discrepancies were on that we're talking about come into the picture. But now we'll have both sides for the next report. And it will look back at the preceding 6 months. Well, that client's report. And it's great. It's great that we are getting out, particularly this report and the preceding report, both came out while the legislature was still in session. Of course, it also includes local lobbying activity, which goes on, and procurement law activity as well. So there's a lot going on, but I think it's important. We all think it's important to get the information out. It's on the website. You can get it through the lobbying database, through the lobbying application. We have public search queries. Anybody who wants to can log into it and search. But in terms of putting this out, getting public attention on it, this is a vehicle that's, I think, extremely effective in getting it out there. And a number of press stories have been generated as a result of these summaries. They're relatively high level, but they're also looking at specific bill lobbying activity. And the nice snapshots to have out there. And over time, the annual report captures all of the data in one place for the entire year. These will show patterns of activity as they occur. And if there are shifts in emphasis on different pieces of proposed legislation or targets of lobbying activity, that will become more evident if you look at the stream of reports as they come out.
Yeah, let's just add, so next month we'll be able to, well, have the client semi-annual to be great, but we'll also have 3 plot points now to kind of look at the trend over the first 6 months of the year from the BIMO, so we can go from the first BIMO to the second BIMO to the third BIMO and kind of look at the differences. So we'll have additional charts on that. And I have heard from several reporters that they find this information very useful. Some actually thanked me for us putting it out there. And a couple asked for some of the information early because they just couldn't wait to get it. Which I thought was like, so I let them know what, typically when we put them out there, but they are definitely looking at it, and you can see we got some stories on it, but then we also get mentioned in a lot of stories that, you know, you can tell they're reading it and it's attributing to the reporting.
Thanks for the question. The data that we make available to the public, I'm sorry, can I say this?
Yes.
The data that we make available to the public is so helpful to researchers. It's been personally helpful to me when I do my research in other areas. Do we have a dashboard and we make our data?
Honey,
This is on my 2026 wish list. So we are actually right now in talks with ITS to find out how much it'll cost for them to host our dashboard. And when we hired Kathy, our research data analyst, one of our projects in mind was that she would be creating dashboards. So she's playing around with that now. I think our first project will be taking these bi-monthly reports and getting them in a dashboard format. That'll be easy to use. She's been looking at other websites. We've been having the preliminary reads with ITS. We're waiting for them.
Perfect.
They're redoing their cost structure. So we're waiting for them to tell us how much it's going to cost. So we'll make sure that's reflected in our budget ask for that money, or we'll see. It depends on how much, because it really depends on how many people use it. So it's going to be hard to estimate, what the total cost is going to be, but, we'll look at the budget and hopefully we'll be able to add that in. But yes, that's a project that we're working on, and
Great.
yeah, we're getting very excited about dashboards.
We're doing a lot of comparative work.
That'd be very helpful.
Chair.
Just that dashboard you're talking about, how does that relate to the existing search function that we have in the website?
So the way the dashboard works is, at least so we're going to try a couple and then say, oh, well, this is how that works, and then see what more we can do. So we'll still have our PSQ, we'll still have our canned reports that people can love, they'll still be open and why. What we plan to do though is take like all of the data from each of the BIMOs and plot it out in the dashboard. So you can say, I want to see all of 2024 BIMOs. I just want to see the first 6 months. We'll have the CSAs in there. They can compare, like, well, how did the CSAs compare to the BIMOs? And they'll be able to run different data, pull up
So
different
it's the
data.
same data, but it's just
Yes.
making it much more interactive.
Yeah.
and
Yes,
useful.
exactly,
Great.
exactly.
Fantastic.
We haven't figured out exactly what it's gonna look like. That's what we're doing, but that's the idea.
Great.
Yeah, it's so helpful.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
there are models that we're looking at from other jurisdictions, but no jurisdiction has the depth of data that we
That we do. That's great.
So I have a couple of questions.
Commissioner Barr?
So I was just curious about why we break up health generally from health nursing home. And I kind of have an idea, but I did want to ask.
Oh,
So,
it's the subjects lobby. So that's the way it is in the lobbying application, where they
Oh, I see.
select what subject. So there's like general, there's nursing homes, and there's, I don't know how many, 5 or 6 for health.
Yes, so that it wasn't just health.
I
So you
see.
can be a
So
little more
you know-
specific.
And
More as like
we
a
made it,
medical.
You used to be able to, some years ago, they could form type,
Mm.
and then there was no way to have like data standardization, that kind of thing, and then we also
Oh,
had to
yeah.
break up not just health, but what part
Right,
of health
okay.
are you looking at? So that's why it says that. I can't remember what other health topics there are, but that was.
There's usually, like,
Yeah.
that might be a bigger one too. They might even have more, but every area, like the environment has like 4 or 5, energy, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
And also during the budget period, so much of the focus is on the budget. And budget, of course, includes Article 7 bills. And while they're broken up broadly, you can't always tell what the lobbyists are interested in specifically within a category. I mean, that's what you'll see 17, the top 20. That we've listed.
I was like I should know the answer. What relates to producer responsibility?
Would you
What
repeat
are
that,
you-
Commissioner
Oh,
Barr?
I'm sorry. I'm on page 8, top 10 most lobbied bills.
Oh, relates.
I see,
I
I
see.
get it now as
That's
I
the
ask the question.
description. So that's the description that, is it the LRS? Is that what the system's called? The lobbying database, that's what's in there. So we take the short description of what the bill is.
I see.
And I want to say that, I don't know which exactly topic. I could look it up and let you know
Okay, I'm
which
just
one it is.
curious.
But we take it, we download it directly from the LRS, or we go in and cut and paste it. Download it.
LRS is the legislative retrieval system.
Thank you.
That
Thank
the
you.
legislature administers or operates.
Yeah, I found this really helpful, interesting, because I didn't know a lot of this stuff, or how it relates and break down lobbying, the different, Senate versus Assembly, and who the top people lobbied are. I think that's very interesting. Like, everything about this was quite interesting. Yeah.
All right, any other questions on the lobbying? And so the May and June, we probably won't see that till September.
No, we'll see that in July.
It'll
Or no, it'll come out early August. So
Early
the
August.
filing deadline
I
is
mean,
July
it'll be
15th.
after. I mean.
Yes,
Yeah, the
but
date
you will
can't be
see it in your emails in early August. That's our plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next time on the agenda is the chair report, committee reports. I don't have anything to report as the chair.
I have none.
Yeah,
Are there any committee reports?
not from legislator.
None from education.
And I know the administration committee is going to be meeting.
Yes, and
there's
the
some
next
discuss- the
agenda
next-
item will relate to the work of that committee.
Okay, so let's move to agenda item 5, proposed meeting guidelines, which I'll ask Commissioner Florence to discuss.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The document you see in front of you, the proposed meeting policies and procedures or meeting guidelines document, we want to refer to it as. This is a document that has been floating around in several different iterations and components for several months now. And that sometime last year, and we've tried to include in the materials the different iterations that have been floating around, one of which was a proposed meeting guidelines that the staff originally proposed to us. I think it was late last year that it first appeared, or early this year. And it,
Earlier this year. Yeah. The original version was way back.
yes, so but it's something that's been floating around for a while and never acted on. And then there was a discussion earlier this year at one of our meetings about the question of the applicability of Robert's Rules of Orders to our meetings that got referred to the admin committee. And that resulted in a draft resolution that's in our booklets that was never acted on for a couple of reasons. One, there was some thinking that since we had never acted on the meeting guidelines and this Robert's Rules of Order issue related to those same meetings guidelines, that perhaps we shouldn't have just a freestanding resolution dealing with the one item, Robert's Rules of Order, without incorporating it into more comprehensive document that we'd never acted on. So that's how we got to this document we're looking at here as the first one in our book today. In addition to that, various iterations of this document have floated around since, I think, at least our March meeting. And in the meantime, we've had a change in our leadership of the organization, and the committee structure of the admin committee has changed. So it's still a work in progress. And even though I think it's noted on our agenda today with an asterisk, meaning it might be for action, I see this primarily as still a discussion document, because I think when we go through what we have here, you'll see there's a few issues that I think warrant discussion as a whole, since we've never had a discussion as a whole. And I see a total of 5. One is the specific language about how the rules of order would apply. And we can talk about that when we get to that. The second is in the section of the policy of the document on supporting materials. This is on page 2 under agenda materials, paragraph 2A.
You're looking at the original document, the latest version?
I am looking at the first document
Okay.
in under tab H. So it's the second page, under supporting materials, paragraph A, where we have talked.
I don't see support.
Did I lose you?
Yeah, oh, I see. I'm sorry, I got it now. Supporting materials is number 2 on your agenda. and-
Correct.
Okay, all right, 2. Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have talked on and off for a number of months, and I think there's been a recommendation frequently from Commissioner Ayers, or Vice Chair Ayers, supported by many of us, about how materials show up in a book. And so there's a proposal made here for what that would include, and I think we want to just focus on that in particular. A third item I see is in the section on executive session. This document does not just repeat verbatim the various provisions in the open meetings law, specifically Public Officers Law, Section 105, that lists whatever A through H, however many that is, permitted exceptions for going into an executive session. It doesn't repeat them verbatim, but we may want that to. But it also includes part of our practice to use the provision in the open meetings law, Public Officers Law, Section 108.3, which is really the carve out for matters that don't even qualify as meetings, for matters made confidential by state and federal law. And the provision we rely on with some regularity is the attorney-client provision in the CPLR. I think before we expressly include that in this policy, I think we want to be clear on just what the scope of that practice is. It's something that's been out there for a long time, and I think we want to have a discussion about that, or at least something ready for the committee to discuss.
I did recirculate
Okay,
a memo from November 2022
okay, I haven't,
that addresses the open meetings
Did it-
law,
Just after midnight.
Just
including
after
sections
midnight.
105 and 108.
I'm sorry, I missed it, even though I drank coffee late.
Yeah.
Yes,
When you say there should be a discussion, does that mean the intent is to send this document to the committee? So it's
Yeah.
just for discussion purposes?
yes, yes, that's what I was trying
Sorry
to
if
say
I
at the
missed that.
beginning.
Yes,
Oh,
great.
okay, yes, only because I think
Yeah, that's great.
I'm going through this list, there's enough things that, and it's been an iterative process so far
Yeah.
that I don't like our sometimes habit of editing on the run and then trying to act on it. I think it's not a good practice for clarity. Another thing that you'll see for the first time in this document, and I think this grew out in part from a discussion that happened in our last meeting about the question about what's included in the minutes and what's not. And I remember our counsel advising us, the narrowness, the arguable narrowness of the law, and what has to be included and what we might want to include. And so this has a suggestion for simplifying the process for producing the minutes, which I think is a very time-consuming process for staff right now anyway. One where the need for extensive written minutes is much less than it used to be, since the law now has the requirement for recording, and we do maintain that. We put it on our website. And it sometimes gets a little bit subjective as to what's in, what's out. So that's in this draft now, something that I don't think we've ever seen before as a whole. And the final thing is the provision on abstentions. That's been out there before. Commissioner Carballo, who offered a lot of comments to me, had some recommendations for taking out part of that as to why a member might be abstaining. And I think while the draft you see reflects her edit, I think since it hasn't been discussed as a whole, we want to do that. So those are the items that I think we need to discuss. So with that,
We discuss in committee on that.
no, just discuss now to see what the thinking of the group is, because again, we're getting to the point where we've got a 3-person committee. We've got one member who who had made clear she had comments to offer in, and we've seen various iterations at different times. It seems to me that before we go back to committee to finalize it, if we've got this here now, I think there's value to hear what the whole has to say without necessarily coming to a final decision. This is just,
I'm not really concerned about that. I think it is committee work and not general work. And that you've given everybody an opportunity to give you input, which is in that document now. You've got the input. Did you not get input from everybody on that?
I did not. I did not.
Oh,
I did
Because
not.
I thought, yeah.
Oh, well, here's the thing. What I did was
You gave everybody the opportunity to review it and get back to you. People reviewed it and got back to you. So my question is,
That-
what more general input you need to have at this table as opposed to bringing it directly to committee?
I think there are people who have not seen certain components of this. I think the section on how we're doing the minutes, there's not, I don't know if Commissioner Ayers had seen that. I know Commissioner Karras hadn't seen some of this.
So then just distinguish for me,
public.
distinguish for me the
It's in
difference
the book.
between the committee work and the general discussion now. What is the distinction between the two? Why you need to?
Well, I think, one, I don't know what's going, maybe there will be very little left for committee, but there's not going to be anything for us to vote on today. And so in terms of getting the final document ready to be presented again, the committee will meet to make sure this is it.
I agree with all of that.
The other thing I want to be clear on is, and this is where, as the executive director said, he circulated a memo about, that was prior on the applicability of the open meetings law and the use of.
That we haven't seen yet.
Well, we have seen, I guess we've seen it once
We've
before.
seen it before.
But it was, we haven't had a chance to look at that. I think when it comes to how we use the Public Officers Law 108.3, the matters made confidential by state and federal law, specifically the CPLR's attorney-client privilege. I think we want to make clear that we understand the scope of that before we memorialize it in this as our guideline. That's all.
Yeah, but I mean, just as an observation, and I know folks haven't seen that memo for a couple of years now, because it originally circulated in 2022. But, and maybe this is something you want to discuss, things that are protected by state or federal law are exempted from the open meetings law, and discussions of them don't constitute meetings because they're protected matter. We can't make public.
Correct. That's how 108
But
works.
what I'm saying is whether it's in the meeting rules or not, we are still compelled to
Right.
apply those provisions that provide for confidentiality. For example, the confidentiality provisions that are in section 94 of the executive law. It's not optional.
No question.
We have to protect those. Protected attorney-client material. I guess there could be a collective determination to waive the privilege, but I think the statute contemplates that the commission would protect the privilege typically. So, I mean, that matter is protected by law, and on an individual issue, advice could be provided by general counsel, for example, on whether a particular matter is within the ambit of CPLR 4508 or protected by Executive Law 94, Section 10M or 11B.
I guess I think the outstanding issue that has come up on a number of occasions relates only to reading the specific matter made confidential by state law that falls within that 108.3 ambit is the attorney-client provision. And where I think there might still be an open issue, because I know we had this conversation at a meeting, maybe even a year ago. As you just pointed out, one thing, what is confidential under the CPLR? And I don't want to play the role of giving the legal opinion, but it seems to me, if I could finish, that it's advice, what is protected is the legal advice given by the attorney, but the privilege is held by the party receiving the advice. That's one. So you said, yes, conceivably, we could waive it if we wanted to. But the second, and I think the more nuanced but really important question is, what do we mean by legal advice? We are an agency where everything we do is governed by very specific legal provisions, but not everything. If there were a question, what does the law say about something on lobbying or something like that? And if we asked that question, what are the specifics of that? And Keith told us what the law says. In my mind, and I think the case law would bear that out, it's not legal advice. That's answering a question about law. Legal advice is where you've got a question out there. It's options you got to make. And so when you're listening to legal advice, you're entitled to that being confidential. In my mind, but this is not my job to do this research. When we know what the options are, and we've heard the legal advice, and we start to have a policy discussion about what we're going to do with the legal advice. I think I remember a time when Commissioner Ayers cited from one of the Committee on Open Government's opinions that you get to a point where that privilege and that basis for that discussion terminates, and the rest of the discussion is not privileged.
Wait. Okay, so, Vice Chair Harris has been waiting to speak.
Thanks. Yeah, which is fine. I'm happy to wait in the queue. And Claudia, I want to address part of your question. In terms of what the role of the committee is here and what the role of the larger group is, it seems to me that it's important for everyone to understand what questions we're sending to the committee. So it's appropriate here, I think, for Nancy, as she's doing, to explain what the unresolved questions are that she feels requires more committee work. And I agree with you that this question of what we do in executive session versus what we do in public session is really difficult. And it's something that I feel really confused about every time it comes up. And it's something that I think it would be good for us to try, if possible, to develop some guidelines in this document on. Without getting into the merits of it, I think that's a really useful thing that the committee could work on with staff. So I appreciate your wanting to dig into that. I also was, I didn't send in comments by email, for which I apologize, but I was interested in Dolly's comments and about sort of some of the guidelines for meeting conduct that I gather she was suggesting to her. I don't have a view on that, but if I could come to the committee meeting, I'd be interested in hearing the discussion of that as well. And I also just wanted to say that I think the thinking about how to do shorter minutes seems really useful to me. I think that we should think about, I would encourage the committee when you look at that, to think about the purpose of minutes as a document, and sort of to whom in the public are those minutes going to be useful and for what? Because it seems to me that the conversational style of minutes that we've been doing up until now is the length of that makes it challenging for members of the public to go into it and see. I appreciate how we get there, because I do the same thing. I transcribe things when I'm not sure how to focus them. But I think that the suggestion of doing minutes that are just recording the actions taken, and if there is no action taken, recording the fact that a discussion was had, that seems like a great way to do them. I would also encourage the committee to think about, maybe this is a suggestion for Emily and her colleagues on the staff about whether we could put up the minutes from a meeting next to the video recording of the last meetings. I think right now people have to go into the next meeting's materials.
We have it on the, so each commission meeting has its own page that has the agenda, the
Oh.
agenda documents, the video embedded, and, but I see the final.
But once we approve the minutes don't
Yeah,
go
the
back on
final.
that page, do they?
No, yeah, they do
Do
go
they?
back on that page. It sometimes takes a while to get the final,
Oh,
but yeah.
maybe I just was looking. at
So, or they're not
I
done
don't-
yet. Sometimes the final take a while, but we're rectifying that right now.
Great.
We're now putting minutes up within like 3 or 4 business days.
Okay,
So,
great.
so we'll make sure they're on the commission meeting page, because that's a great point.
And then I think, yeah, the shorter becomes more useful. The last thing I'll say is just, I may have said this before, so forgive me, but I would encourage the committee, unless there's a reason not to do it this way, to draft this as a resolution so that it goes with the other resolutions that we have on the website and it's easier for people to find. I think our practice has been when something is not governing the public, but governing our internal procedures, that we typically adopt that as a resolution so that if people are in the future looking for our rules on how we do things or our practices, that they look to that list of resolutions. Maybe there's a reason not to do that, but my instinct would be that it just makes it much easier to find for everybody.
Good comments.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
I guess I want to limit what I have to say now. I just think that, again, I don't disagree with any of the specifics that you've outlined. They all make sense to me, and it's worth conversations. I also like the idea that you've articulated the various areas in which the committee plans to pursue. But I do think that I need to be clear on what is the role of the committee and what is the role of the group in terms of conversation. And I think sometimes, and in this particular case, we go into such in-depth information at the general meeting, it kind of circumvents the committee work. And it keeps us, I mean, I thought the whole issue of committee was to take complex issues that take up a lot of time on the agenda and appropriate, meaningful time on the agenda, but can sometimes best be worked out in committee, bringing the professionals around us to help us come up with the committee feels makes sense, and then present that larger document, that larger conversation to the committee. And I felt like we were going in the opposite direction here today with this particular agenda item. But the particulars, I do fully agree with. We need to have that conversation, but I want to make sure that what we talked about in terms of policy for committee work and what we talked about, or what we are now agreeing about in terms of policy for running meetings, should be consistent. And our practice should be consistent with that. And sometimes it's not.
Commissioner Carvalho wanted to.
So, yeah,
Then go to and back to Vice Chair.
I have to say, it's a nice job, like I said, of redlining this and getting everyone's comments. I kind of thought that was so well done that we'd be voting on this and it's ready to go. I think as far as the open meetings law, we have discussed that. I don't know how many times about, and there is a difference of opinion about what's subject to it and what isn't. And I think our procedure has been that if there's a question about whether it should be done in the public session or the executive session, that we will discuss it in the executive session and then have the discussion again in the public session. And that's just to make sure that there's nothing confidential or that shouldn't be, to make sure whether it should be public or executive. So I don't know that we should spend any more time on the open meetings law, because the open meetings law, the law is the law is the law, and we always have our general counsel here, deputy general counsel, who will tell us whether it falls into the category or not. And I think it's such a nuanced issue that I don't think we can put a policy down other than saying that we're going to observe the law. So I just don't know that that's a good use of time, because even if the committee recommends it, we're still going to all have our differences about that. And again, if it is something that should be public, even if we discuss it in executive, we'll come back out and discuss and have the same discussion so the public knows what we're thinking about and what we talked about at executive. As far as the minutes versus the recording, I do agree it shouldn't be so detailed, but it is a nice review for me. As I'm reading, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm happy with that. But I guess if I really, I don't want to take too much time, staff time doing that. I guess if I was that curious, I can go back and listen to the recording. But it is, it is helpful to me to have that. And so part of me feels, I feel like I wish, I guess if you want to send, what else would you, and I apologize that I'm asking you that, I try to write down the numbers. I know supporting materials is an issue, and that's something we've discussed really a lot too.
I don't know on that point, there's much more to say. I think the executive director has heard that. I think this
Yeah.
vote starts to reflect that we're getting that. So there may be very little left to say on that.
At the first two, I'm sorry, I didn't write down the first two were.
The Roberts Rules of Order, just to make sure, but
I don't think there's really much to say about.
There might
I mean,
not be.
unless there's, no, I'm asking, we can do this now.
Wait,
What is there to send to the committee is what I guess what I'm asking.
What
I
I
thought
was,
this was done. Yeah, sorry.
what I was trying to do was, when I explained the history of this document and why I didn't think it would be necessarily something we could vote on today, is because I was trying to focus our attention for the discussion on what I saw were the 5 key items that could merit discussion. That's why I ticked them off. The rules of order, the agenda stuff, the executive session stuff, the minutes, and the abstention stuff. That was just to help us focus the discussion.
Today.
Yes, to not have, and we'd go back to it, just so people could understand the process. Then we got onto this side question of what's committee work and what's commission work. And that's fine. If I could answer that, my thinking on the distinction between the two, to Commissioner Edwards' question, I think there is no fixed answer to that, because I think it depends on the nature of what a committee is doing. And I think this work, which committee will this have the most issues attached to it is the administration committee. And I'll tell you what, we have 3 standing committees. Education, which is, it's discrete, there are specific, it's a program, there could be really technical issues about how we do it. That makes sense. Same with the legislative committee. When you get to the admin committee, the way our policy reads, it says the jurisdiction of that committee is to make, to review matters that improve the efficient operation of the body. By definition, what the admin committee is going to do is going to be considering things that affect how we, the current 7 of us, operate. And my concern becomes, particularly now, when we are 7 members, we have a 3-member committee with the permitted participation of any member, and we've got, as it's noted in the minutes, the chair has stated that either the chair or the vice chair wants to participate in committee meetings. So we're going to have 4 of the 7 of us talking about these things. My sense is this one in particular is a good one to make sure the committee knows if there is some general thinking out there, let it be known before we go back to finalize. That's all.
All of a quick response. Number 1, we made that agreement. We made the effort. You made the effort to get the general input from everyone through a memo. And the committee, I might point out, never met to discuss this document.
Correct.
And why is up here for potential conversation? We never met after the new chair was put forth. The agreement was, we're doing just what we're doing now. It put input from everybody with regard to the base document from which the committee would work. Once that input was gathered, and so that we're all on the same page, the committee was to meet to discuss.
Right.
That never happened.
But that's what we're doing now.
This is not a committee meeting. This is a commission meeting. No, it was on the agenda for voting today. That's been withdrawn because of concerns that were raised by the committee, by myself. But we've never had a conversation about it. We never held a committee meeting to have a conversation about this. So we're now, it seems to be a reiterative,
Iterative.
a reiterative process. The West, we're gathering information, we collect the base, we didn't meet, so now we're now gathering information to collect more base to meet.
I agree.
We're being redundant. That's my argument. I said, okay, so tell me what the role of the committee is, if that's indeed the case.
Right.
And we go
Okay, so
back
then we
to
go.
this whole discussion around, it's a small group where, we don't have all the appropriate number of members. We have to operate efficiency. We're going around in circles. We knew that when we made the decision around committees. I'm only saying, give the committee
Give it back.
an opportunity to work, as opposed to assuming it's not going to work and coming back to the general audience. Now we've spent almost an hour on a subject that has not been discussed with the committee, as a committee. That's my concern.
Vice Chair, you want to
Respond?
That's what it says.
I've been waiting since the
Actually,
last
the-
time she spoke to respond to it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that okay? I mean, Claudia, to me, the answer to your question is, when we decided that there would be committees, the basic arrangement usually is that the group, the commission decides what question we want the committee to answer, and the committee answers the question. Part of that, for me, responsible prep work is before the committee meets, you have a scoping conversation with the larger group. And I think that's what we're doing today.
Which is what we did in part today. Yes, we did.
We've spent most of the conversation on this process point about whether this is appropriate for the larger group, but I think that it is a good idea for a committee to come to the larger body and to say, here's what we think we're going to answer with this document. The committee's job is to come back with something that 6 or hopefully 7 of us can vote for, not just to come back with what the 3 of them think is the best answer to the question.
I don't think you're getting my point. I don't disagree with what Nancy had put forth. I don't disagree. Again, let's put it into context. What we presented today as a group, as the committee chair, is a compilation of a historical overview of how we've gotten to the final document, which included getting input from everybody on board, everybody on the committee, with regard to what should be contained. Ultimately, once we're on that same page in feedback, we were going toward voting on this document. And I'm saying through this whole process, the committee has not met to inform the commission about what it is what you've discovered, what's been discovered, and the key outstanding issues that the committee wants to resolve is here. You could say, I disagree or agree with that. Now we go back to committee and discuss. What I'm arguing is that it should end there.
So when you say it should end there, what should end?
Laying out what we agreed to do and getting feedback from that. It should end there. And then I'm trying to get an understanding of what's the distinction between what we do in committee and what we do at the commission level.
If I can just make a couple of observations. One, the meeting rules have been discussed, not in great detail. Staff has proposed meeting rules going back to 2022. So there's a lot of history on these. In many respects, that they were pushed aside because we had other issues to address. And I think this is a much more refined document. In terms of how committees conduct their business, I don't think there's anything in any body of law that prevents a committee from communicating among its members by means other than convening a formal meeting. I think it's perfectly, and covered it in the old memo, which also goes back to 22. It's perfectly acceptable for committee members to communicate with one another. They're not making decisions, obviously, about any subject matter. And in my understanding on this particular item, that the committee met in the sense that a draft was circulated, comment was elicited from members of the committee on the document, and I think it was also circulated to the full commission, or to 5 of the 7 members. in any event, when
It's
the
a fair
chair and chair are included in it. So I think procedurally, you know, if the body feels there's more to discuss on the document of court and that it should be in a formally convened meeting, then staff will make the necessary arrangements.
Isn't
But
this,
I kind of think, and this sort of goes to the point that Commissioner Caraballo made, there have been many opportunities for input into the document. So I wouldn't want anyone to think that anybody's views have been on the committee or otherwise have been given short shrift in the process. And I think there's general agreement about that. There may be some additional items that Commissioner Groenewegen thinks should be addressed. I should correct attorney-client privileges, CPLR 4503. And this spoke earlier, but that's another point. I'm not sure what would be expected of staff in terms of providing further guidance in terms of meeting rules.
That's a separate conversation.
isn't there a document somewhere? I think we documented somewhere that when we looked at different ways in which we operate, that meeting individually on a one-on-one basis among committees should not result in usurping committee meetings. Am I right?
I don't recall that. I thought we had decided that, but particularly, one of the reasons we have on our legislative agenda modifying the open meetings law is that there are often just frictional costs involved in convening a formal meeting and arranging the space, doing all the things we have to do with media. And in some instances, if the committee is only going to meet in order to go over a document, it's perfectly permissible to circulate the document and to elicit comment. And my view, and I think staff generally agrees with this, is that satisfies both the commission's rules with respect to how committees should operate, and also it doesn't violate the open meetings law.
I want to look at the committee structure that we agreed
The
upon
resolution.
at some point.
Vice Chair,
Can I say, Claudia, maybe it would help me understand your concern, and forgive me if I just missed this, but so it sounds like your concern is about what was done sort of up to this point with this particular document. What is it that you think should have been done differently? Is it that you think the committee should have met as a group
Yes.
before Nancy presented
Yes.
this sort of scoping
Yes, I
question
do.
to the body? Okay.
We talked about that.
Yeah, and I thought we'd come to an understanding that we'd have this discussion today and we would be scheduling a committee meeting probably in early July to have that conversation.
I know, but to me, it felt like today we had a committee meeting. That's what it feels like.
Today in this body, you mean just now?
That's what it feels like. I could be wrong, but that's what it
See, it
feels
felt
like.
for whatever it's worth, it felt to me more like Nancy was seeking guidance on what the charge is to the committee, what the issues are that the non-committee members would like to see the committee address, which seems to me like when I was a committee chair, I would have wanted to do the same thing. Like, let me gather people's questions, because it may not be ready for detailed edits. I mean, Dolly thought it was, and that's great. Dolly sent her comments, which as usual were very helpful, I thought, but
Well, thank you.
so, yeah.
Right, so I guess since we're here, I think we should talk about whether I know you identified the ones you thought we should spend time on, but as far as, because we're all here, are there any issues about these? Like, is there an issue with the rules of order part? Like, does anyone,
To me, this is committee work.
this is,
Yeah,
okay.
that's how it
Okay.
feels to me. Maybe I'm
So,
wrong.
I
But this feels like
I
committee
guess
work.
what I'm trying to say is, what should we send back to the committee? Because if there's consensus
She's
on,
proposing 5 areas that we expand upon.
okay, and I'm just saying, I'm asking the
no,
commission.
I think what Mr. Goldwagon was saying is that these are 5 areas that she has identified, but there may be other areas. And she wanted some input on those areas.
Additional areas.
No, the 5 areas she identified, to go back to the committee and come to a final resolution on those, and any others that people may want to raise. Is that what she said?
I mean, for what it's worth, I agree with what I think Nancy's view was, although you can say, which is that I think you were just asking us whether we
I-
thought there was stuff to talk about.
I
That's what I thought it
sometimes
was.
figure,
Right.
I struggle so hard to think about how to present something
Yeah.
clearly,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I
And we appreciate.
I'm usually pretty good at that. And I thought I had done that, saying, this is what this is what I think. And then we tend to get on these tangents that throw it off. And my goal to try to structure the discussion was to try to keep the discussion focused, but then we get into these very different tangential issues. And I think it makes it very hard for us to move through issues efficiently. That's all.
Well,
So
it's a process concern.
All right, so,
Commissioner Carvalho,
so that being said, I'm just, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is something you want to do in committee, and if you do, then just let me know, but if not, I just thought maybe we should go through our 5 areas and see if there's really anything to send back, right? So is there any, and so in my mind, I'm thinking, the question is, does everyone agree with the proposed changes on the rules of order that were circulated? And if so, maybe that's something that the committee does have to look at again.
right.
And then number 2, and just go through that. So I think, so that's my question, I think you did a great job with this document, and thank you for incorporating everything so clearly, everybody's comments so clearly in here. So is that something we're gonna do now? Go through and see what of those 5 or 6 things we need to send back to committee, or whether absent the 1 or 2 that are gonna go
I don't
back
think
to
we want to vote on anything.
No,
I don't know that we necessarily want to come to a conclusion, but if you have suggestions about any of the areas that she's raised,
Okay, I
I
already
would do
gave
that, and then we'll send it back to the committee.
All right, I gave my comments. All right.
I think that's very helpful, Dolly. Thank you.
Okay.
Because I think what Dolly's doing is asking what the committee charge should be.
Right.
And that
Thank
seems
you.
really useful.
That's what I say.
And for me, yeah, I actually didn't agree with the change about the general counsel automatically being a parliamentarian. I think it's better for the ED to appoint the parliamentarian.
Okay, so
But
that's
I
an
was
issue
curious
that
about
should go
why,
back.
so I don't want to just say I disagree. I'm
No,
curious
no,
about that.
so that's right, so that should go back to the committee, right? So that's one, that
On
you're charged with that one.
Well, the other one was on the open meetings law question about compliance. I think it would be, if it's possible for the committee to develop a more clear set of guidelines about when we're seeking legal advice, how to separate the legal advice part of the conversation, which is the executive session, from the policy decision part of the decision, which is public session. I think that it's worth trying to improve that part of the document, and I'd be grateful. Those are the 2 things that I saw. And, I'm sorry, and the third one, Dolly suggested deleting the conduct expected of members section. And I would be interested in a discussion about why that suggestion was made and where to go. I'm not trying to have that here, but as far as charging the committee, I was curious about that myself.
Okay. Oh, the other, and I could, if you want to send it back, I can just join that meeting and give my comments there. That's fine. All right, and the 4th is executive session, and
That's what Ava was just talking about. I mean, Commissioner, Vice Chair Ayers.
so that was the, sorry. And then the 4, is there, people want to discuss abstention? I know
No,
there's.
well, the next one's minutes, and
Okay, sorry, I didn't come. Okay, 3 and 4.
Okay,
All right.
I guess I also was curious about Commissioner Carvalho's suggestion in agenda and materials about deleting the any member may suggest an item.
The what?
There's
if you
language
could
in
look at the red lined copy.
there's language in the section on
Well,
agenda.
I'll tell you, yeah. So, we already have a new session, like new business session. Why doesn't that fall in there? So it's one of them here. Not here.
Chair,
It's this part.
Commissioner Austin also has his hand up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so-
Commissioner Austin?
Yes, thank you. This is at least the 6th or 7th meeting over the last 3 years where we've spent more than an hour talking about how we vote, how we do this, how we do that. Our job is, and if I remember correctly, the public officers law does not discuss that this be a primary area of concern for us. And yet we keep going back over the same old thing every single time. Let's get a set of simple rules and let's forget it and move forward with the business that we have to do. It's just silly. And if I were a member of the public watching this, I would be throwing my hands up in despair. This is just not the way to do it. Forgive me.
So what is the way to do it then?
We've got a set of rules. We've been operating for 3 years. Nothing, if it ain't broke, why are we breaking it? Why are we hassling over whether or not the person who abstains has to explain why they abstain? Why are we hassling about Robert's Rules of Order? I mean, there's a Yiddish word for it called Nourishkeit, nonsense. That's what it is.
Instead,
Let's get down to our
Well, I think
business.
we-
Let's hear from Brian and deal with our cases. That's what we should be doing.
So I
I would,
think we
mo- I
have
would
been-
move, I would move to end this
operating
discussion
that, go ahead. Go ahead.
and let's just get on to our business.
I think we've been operating ad hoc, and I think it's good for us to place how we're going to proceed in written form, and then we will follow. And that's what we're trying to do. I know the discussion today went a little beyond that. But I think the ultimate objective is to have written rules for our meetings is a good one, and then we should continue with it. And unless there's anything else anyone wants to say about this proposed rules today, I will refer it back to the committee for a report at the July meeting. And I think everybody who's on the commission will be invited to participate in that committee meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda. Now, we had some questions about what we were concerned there were a number of people who were late filers for the financial disclosure. What might we do to make it easier for our staff to get people to comply? And I think Commissioner Ayers had indicated that it was a process that the city uses. I think
Commissioner
that was Karen's.
Commissioner Karas.
That was Karen's.
Mr. Karas had indicated that there's a process the city uses, and I think you want to have a discussion today about what the city's process is when there is a late filer.
Yes, and in anticipation of the adoption of the meeting rules, we did provide little memos at the head of each agenda item that involved substantive discussion. Commissioner Groningen provided for meeting rules discussion. There's a similar memo that looks at both the New York City Administrative Code and the regulation, the board rule, the commission COID in New York City adopted for dealing with the assessment of late fees for city financial disclosure statements that are 30 days or more late. They assess $250 per 30-day period for late fees. For recidivists, there's an additional $250 that's assessed. The city administrative code does provide penalties for late filing that cover a broad range. Starting at $250, depending on excess of that. In 2023, according to their annual report, the COID collected over $40,000 in late fees. Interestingly, their compliance rate, and maybe it's boosted by the availability of fees, is somewhat lower than our compliance rate, ultimate compliance rate with financial disclosure. Statement compliance and compliance with the requirement. Timeliness is a different issue. I've asked Melinda Funk, our Deputy Director of Financial Disclosure, to sort of give a general estimate of the amount of staff time that goes into chasing down what last year were over 7,000 late filings. Commissioner Parabite.
I'm sorry, but I just wanted, I couldn't hear what you said. So you're saying that despite these penalties, the compliance is slightly lower than ours? Oh,
It is.
Oh.
We're over 99%. They're at 98.5.
okay. I thought I
As
heard
I
that
said
wrong.
earlier, of those over 7,000 individuals who filed late financial disclosure statements to us, there are 39 still outstanding. And we may yet get some of those to file. If they don't, and they should have filed, and you have to see how the facts evolve, then we do have the provision in our statutes, the POL 73-A, and in section 94, the executive law, to seek very substantial $40,000 penalties for non-filing. So we do have that. The statute talks about, our statute talks about disciplinary action. It also has a provision that indicates that no other fees or penalties can be assessed. So we would need, was my thought, is that we would need a legislative change in order to impose late filing fees. And maybe you ought to pursue that. By Melinda's estimate, staff puts in 5 months worth of time, literally chasing down. And this is after the failure to file notice goes out. This is after the delinquency notices have been made public and have been shared with agency leadership for those agencies where individuals have not filed their financial disclosure statements. The city scheme calls for actual enforcement procedures to be commenced. The assessment of a fine, it's not a late fee, it's a fine, is the initiation of an enforcement due process proceeding. Council representation, somewhat different from the authorization we have in the Lobbying Act to impose late filing fees for lobbying late filings, where we can do that administratively. There's a procedure we have to go through. The commission has amended the regulations on that, so they're now embodied in the regulation. Less complicated, and maybe that's the kind of thing we want to seek for late FDS filings. Another suggestion that's come from the FDS unit also would require legislative change. It's for that first notice of failure to file, which statutorily is confidential, to be something that we could at least share with the affected employees, agency, their ethics officers, their agency heads, their general counsel. See if that's a way to deal with the compliance issues.
Like I said, I wasn't aware. So currently, that first notice can only go to the person who didn't file, not to their,
Correct.
not to their agency.
Right.
The ethics officer.
It's statutorily confidential. It's one of those things that would fall. You know, we would talk about individuals on the list, and we share a list of names would be an executive session. And then, you know, when that goes out, there's a relatively short period of time with it before the delinquency notice, which is public, in which they'll go to the agency and goes on our website, is issued. But, you know, ultimately, we do have a very high rate of compliance. It's not, it's, you know, it's voluntary in the sense that it's not the result, culmination of enforcement proceedings, but it does involve a lot of staff time.
I just struggle with that as, you know, as a volunteer public servant, having been on most of my adult life. It's a volunteer service. It's a pain. And to be heavy-handed, I'm not quite sure how I would receive that.
Well, I think most of these people who are filing are employees.
Most of them.
I mean, it seems
I
like
see what you're saying.
under the statute, we can fine them for not filing their disclosure, but our efforts get them to file it, and they ultimately file it very late. So then there is no penalty.
One of the thoughts I had when I was thinking about this is, and it started with where the executive director was, that the ultimate compliance rate is very high.
Yeah.
And if you step back, at least if I step back and I think, what's the purpose of the financial disclosure form? It's to put out there a public document so that if you're curious, could there be a conflict of interest in how someone is performing their job? You've got it. And it's getting the document, it's having the document on file so you can get that information, which is, I think, the core objective of the whole initiative. Yes, timeliness is important, but it seems to me we generally do have a pretty high rate, even in terms of timeliness. You know, yes, they have to spend some months tracking people down. And it seems to me there are, as we've just heard, possible legislative changes that could maybe be far less controversial than seeking a legislative change to impose a late penalty, which would not go over well
Right.
with an organized workforce generally, I would think. But what you could do is just do as the executive director suggested, maybe put the agencies on notice sooner so that they could do a little bit nudging. That, one, they'd have a smaller pool of people to nudge. They see these people regularly. It would take the workload away from our staff to do that. But in the end, the goal is to get the document, not to discourage people from filing a document. So it seems to me, if there are far less unpopular ways to do it, to correct a problem that's not even that great, as opposed to create a different legislative scheme that's going to have this notice and an opportunity to be heard, only to yield $40,000. It seems to me there are more efficient ways to do this. But the first thing I would think, if this is something we want to talk about, and it seems there have been a lot of internal discussions among the staff, it would be to share with us a more detailed description of this has been suggested, and ask the kind of questions I'm talking about now. What's the problem? What's the solution? What are the possible solutions? What are the pros and cons of various solutions? What are the staff implications of solutions? It doesn't have to be really you could do a matrix or some kind of simplified chart to do it. But it seems to me, just listening to what you just said, there's this mishmash of issues. And it's like, okay, so here's some background information about one possible idea, but where does it fit in the overall scheme of things? And it seems before we could have a really meaningful discussion on this, we'd want to know, we'd want a clearer statement of the problem we're trying to solve. What are the options for solving it? And what are the cost benefit analysis of the different options? That's what I think, if we're going to have this discussion, would be useful. And that wouldn't be committee work, that would be staff work to come back to the commission.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, if what you're looking for is sort of a general reaction to the thought, for what it's worth, I think similar to Nancy, I'm not intuitively leaping at the idea of imposing fines on people. And I guess that's because for me, there's a distinction between violations or breaches of the public trust, where it's appropriate to penalize an employee in their individual capacity versus not doing your job right or not fulfilling your job requirement. Like in ordinary employment, you don't fine somebody if they're bad at their job or if they're late with a deliverable. In contracts, you do find somebody maybe if that's a sort of established thing. But as a state employee, I was late filing a brief, I get fined. Like that doesn't seem right. And this is so to me, it sort of feels intuitively more appropriate to punish the agency for not managing its employees and teaching them that this is part of their job. Like if we're doing all this staff work, that seems to me a fault with agency management rather than a fault with individual agency employees, because if they're not bugging their employees to get this done, they're not treating this as part of the employee's job requirements. And the legislature says it is part of your job requirements, but that's a different framework than sort of an employee breaching the public trust. That's an intuitive reaction. I'm extremely open to other thoughts, but if you're looking for a first reaction, that's mine.
How long period has to pass before we send out a delinquency notice?
I don't know if we have Melinda online. Under the statute, it's actually a relatively short period. I think in theory, is it 15 days? I don't have it,
Well, the failure to file versus the notice of
Yeah,
delinquency, so
it's
the
a
failure to
15 days to
file.
comply with a failure to file.
Right.
notice. So in theory, we don't do it. We give them more time than that.
And more.
But under the statute, it's a very short period of time. And most, we last, with the 2023 financial disclosure statements, excuse me, that were due in 2024, I think there were 241 notices, formal notices of delinquency, ultimately,
That's not a lot, that's a big
that were
number.
issued. It's a relatively small number.
Yeah, it's a small number.
I don't know if we have Belinda online.
No.
I don't think we do.
Okay. There's not one.
Even if we didn't follow up on those 241 to get to the 39 number, that's still a low number.
Most individuals ultimately file, and they file within a relatively short period of time. The number we're, ultimately tracking down is comparatively small, but the amount of time the unit puts into it is extensive, because we do want to get those statements in.
This could be something we put in the comprehensive review proposals to get
Yeah, it
staff's
could be part of it.
feedback and take, and
Yeah,
we can kind of, as a staff, think about it.
yeah. It might
Yeah,
not be
that's
worth
great.
their while.
Yeah.
I added it, I jotted it down for our growing list.
Yeah, at least we
It doesn't
actually have
have
a
a one
proposal
to
to
do.
it.
But except for always update.
Okay, perfect.
If that's decided.
That'll keep us up there.
So any more comments or questions about this proposal?
Just a very brief point of process. I thought the cover memo is really helpful. I would suggest that maybe in the future, cover memos could start with what action, if any, were. So in other words, like this is just for people's initial feedback or something like that.
Yeah, we weren't seeking any, simply responding to a commissioner suggested that we look into the issue.
Yeah, it'd be helpful to just say something like that.
That was in one draft of the meetings policy too, that it would state what action was requested.
Thank you.
And I guess in this too. I thought it was-
Is there any new or other business?
So can I be clear?
There's-
So
Yes.
is there an agreement that this discussion about ways to improve compliance with FDS filing rates will be referred back to the
Comprehensive.
Comprehensive
Yeah, and I
review
like how you
for-
phrased it too.
Yeah.
Rephrase it that way, because I put just that fees, but I like that ways to increase compliance.
Okay. Okay, so far that's the only item I have for this chart I keep from this meeting so far.
New and other business. As I mentioned earlier, training unit staff has come up with a proposal that while we are waiting for our outside vendor to complete the more sophisticated conversion of the on-demand workforce ethics training refresher course to multi-platform use, that in lieu of that, we make available, we'll continue to have the current SLNS version up, of course, on the OER site. So users who have access to that will be able to continue to use it, and those primarily SUNY and CUNY campuses that have SLNS systems that are compatible will continue to use that. But to augment that, we want to put up what essentially will be video recording, MP4, that any member of the workforce can access without going through MyNY or any other portals like that, just through our website, can access the module, take the course. It will, like CLEs that lawyers on commission and on staff are familiar with, where you have to supply a code. At the end, there'll be a certification, similar to the certification, individual certification we originally required for the ethics lobbying training that we put out. And then the certification information will be provided to ethics officers, and we'll have that information as a training. And taking that course will satisfy the on-demand training requirement. I don't know if we have any training staff.
Marlena sent me the file because she had to step away. I can attempt to play it now,
See if
if
you
you
play
bear
it.
with me for a moment.
They put together a very short preliminary part of what the presentation will look like. And it has the added feature that in addition to the audio track, it has closed captioning. So it has accessibility features. We'll go with those with auditory and visual impairments.
All right, let me share my screen. I might have to unmute for everyone to hear it. Fight it, so just see, there we go. All right, let me see what happens when I hit play.
Make sure you have the audio.
Yeah, hold on, I've got to. So I'm gonna mute us in Albany here so we don't get feedback, and I'll unmute this so we can hear it, and then I'll do everything again, so. Bear with. There we go. All right, here we go. So folks online couldn't hear it. And I'm not sure how to rectify that. At this point. No, like, so when I tried to share it, the folks online couldn't hear it, so the other folks.
Oh.
So it didn't go through the speakers. We could hear it in the room. And I don't know how to fix that. Given that I was throwing this.
I have a copy. I can play it separately for.
Actually, you know what? I think Jean could probably play it because she's not in the room. Hold on, let me just forward it to Jean real quick. She should be able to share it. And she's just said she can try, so we'll forward this to her. Bear with us for a minute. The other thing we could do, if we want to not waste trying to figure this out now, we could figure it out in the break and then play it when we come back. If we want to do that, does that work? Okay.
Yeah, and I apologize. We haven't worked out technical details of it. This was an idea that just developed literally yesterday. That very quickly put together.
Okay, so when we come back,
And
I
that's-
think, is there any other new business? So let's take a motion to enter into executive session. So the public officers, section 105 and executive law 9411. To discuss matters concerning employment of personnel, pending litigation, investigative and enforcement matters, with confidential pursuant to section 94 of the executive code. Mr. Carvalho? Second?
Second.
Well, we're gonna,
Okay.
all in favor?
Aye.
You're live.
Welcome back to the June 18th meeting of the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. Continuing our agenda, we were at new and other business, and we weren't able to display the video earlier. So,
Before that, let me do the.
oh, right,
if I may,
I'm sorry. Thank you.
In executive session, the commission discussed matters related to litigation and legal advice. The commission discussed personnel matters. The commission approved 3 executive law section 9410F investigation reports. The commission closed 7 investigative matters, and the commission heard a report from its internal controls officer. Thank you.
Thank you. You have vertigo.
All right,
Okay.
are you ready for the
All right, Steve,
moving?
ready?
Jean, are you ready for the moving?
And let me say, this is the demonstration we talked about earlier. I think there's an issue with the audio track of a proposed alternative, temporary alternative to the on-demand refresher ethics course for executive branch employees.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, we can see it. Jean, we can't hear it. We were just trying it earlier. You have to unmute yourself, Jean, for it to work. You have to unmute. There you go.
Let's try that one more time.
There you go.
Welcome to the Ethics Refresher, a comprehensive introductory course for new and seasoned state employees, brought to you by the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. The on-demand ethics course is an overview of the ethics laws that apply to all state employees. Your state agency may adopt its own ethics policies that are more restrictive than those covered in this course. This training is for educational purposes only and does not substitute legal advice from the Commission or your agency's ethics officer. This online course will cover the following topics: conflicts of interest, outside activities, gifts and things of value, the post-employment restrictions, and an overview on the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government.
Thank you. Again, this was developed by training staff who've done really a phenomenal job on relatively short notice in putting this together. If the commission approves, we'll make this available on our website. It will be possible to link the program through emails that can go directly to workforce officers, so it'll be easier for them to log in. It does have accessibility features because it does have a closed captioning, as well as the narration component to it. And again, there will be a code embedded in the program, in the video. And at the end of the program, there'll be a pop-up certification for the individual taking the course to complete, and that will automatically be distributed to the employing agency and to our database. And the goal is, while we're waiting for the more sophisticated module to be put together by our vendor, to make this available across the state. And it'll be particularly useful to those individuals who are employed in agencies that are not part of the OER SLMS universe.
So is this ready for our approval now?
It is. We'll go ahead and complete the video, the recording, and make it available and have ITS work on the certification form. And there's some additional information we're gathering. We want to keep the costs of putting this out low so we can have it on our own website. We can also make it for the MP4 available to agencies to put on their own websites. But we think it could be made available without incurring web hosting costs. But ITS is looking at that for us.
So do we need to do this today or for July?
No, we'd like the commission to do it today, because as soon as we finish it, we want to get it out there quickly and get those numbers up.
Is there a motion?
Motion.
Sorry, what are we,
To approve authorization to release that.
oh, yeah, sure.
Approving use of it, until we can have, the more formal module that has the test questions where you can't go past each section until you satisfactorily answer them. For now, we'll have the certification.
I'll second for discussion, but I just have a question.
Sure.
Do we usually approve the content of trainings? This seems, I don't feel like we've done that before.
Yeah,
It's not the content, it's the modality. The commissioners had expressed, I would say more than a desire. You wanted us to have the test questions embedded in the,
Oh.
in the program so that individuals couldn't just skip ahead. We're not going to be able to have that now. That's what the vendor is working on.
I get it.
Converting the score thing we have now that only works in SLMS systems is something that can work in an HTML web environment. So we're substituting the code. It's the way it used to be done in the prior agency, an embedded code in the refresher course. And the individual employee has to certify that they completed the course, as we do for lobbyists and client ethics training.
I mean, I don't have any problem with that. I'm just a little bit hesitant to, this feels more like a implementation thing than a policy making thing. I'm a little reluctant to get the commission involved at this level of what feels like a staff call. I don't.
That's fine. We have the resolution, adopting on an emergency basis regulations allowing staff to make decisions about deferring training, extending training time, modifying training. Or preliminary review is we want to commission specific approval for this. If there's a consensus that staff has the authority.
Well, I'll say my view is that
I'll go ahead and do it.
my
because I
view is
think
that
it's
staff has the
works.
authority. I'm not sure how to put that to the group, but
Well, without a motion, if you just want to have a discussion,
I mean, I suppose I could.
couldn't we just ask the question without a motion? Because if the answer is,
Go ahead and do it.
it would be, does anybody think staff has to do? Speak now,
Has to.
approve this.
Well,
The commission.
let me add a little bit more to that. We have been modifying the training requirement with commission approval since inception because infrastructure didn't exist within the state from July of 2022 to begin training annually every number of years. So we've been building up to that. And the commission approved the program of getting the 2 trainings in without regard to sequence, just so that we could aim at getting everybody trained at least once over that 2.5-year period. That's a modification. I guess this is a content question. And if we have the implicit authority within the ambit of that to substitute what we're going to do here for the other on demand, that's fine.
I'm just trying to think procedurally how to. Does our parliamentarian have any suggestions on how to address this?
That's you right now.
I mean, I suppose I could make a motion to affirm that staff has the authority or I could.
We could
But
just do
that's
this
not
motion
giving
and we
them
could
authority.
deal with
They didn't
that.
have beforehand, right? You said you got permission throughout the process from the beginning.
The way we structured
Yes.
the program to get everybody trained within a 2.5-year
Yeah,
period.
that's all
Yeah,
I'm saying.
I don't think we're really not approving the content. We're just giving them authority
To
provide this interim.
peace, right?
Piece.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you have delegated to me the authority to determine the content for the program. But, and now we have an interim regulation, agency regulation,
Yeah.
some objections to it, permanent regulation allowing staff to grant extensions and exemptions. Only because this is different from what we originally proposed
Right, I
when we
see.
put together the on-demand, I'll call them bells and whistles, but with, greater assurance. And now we're going to an interim measure, having those who take the course certified rather than have the process of taking it provided.
Well, I might offer that if it's in the chair's if the chair has a sense that this particular alternative fits within the ambit of training as the commissioners have previously approved, then there wouldn't be a need for any further action to authorize this sort of augmentation of the way we deliver training per your direction already.
So I could ask whoever made the motion, I forget who it was, to withdraw it on that grounds, and other people could.
I could rule the motion out of order because it is raising an issue that really is not an issue. If that were what the chair believed.
But, based upon what you reported, I think we had decided previously that we did want trainings to include the ability to check as you went through, and this would actually be a divergence from that.
Correct.
Oh, and that's why you're saying.
Temporary.
Right. So I think perhaps we should have a.
Oh, did we second, so I could ask a question, we have discussion?
I did second for discussion.
So, but still, I thought this was addressing, also Michael's, always wanted, like that you could rush through and then answer the questions and not do it. But you're saying this is embedded as you go, and so if you miss it, then
Even
you
if you
don't.
miss the code, it's, again, it's
So it's a little-
identical to a CLA where
Right, so I think
you
it's.
might be able to fast forward or not, but you have to supply the code when you do the
Okay, I think
certification.
it's-
So you have to swear that you certify that you've taken the course, and you have to.
As
provide the
opposed
correct
to
code.
waiting till the end of that section and taking the,
That's
answering
where you
those
can't
questions.
continue to the end and you're not going to get credit
Okay.
unless you ultimately answer the questions
I thought
correctly.
this was a
So we're not
little
gonna
bit of an
have that.
improvement, so that's nice. I'm sorry.
Well, this won't have that. The module we're working on, the current on-demand does have it. That will remain up on SLMS.
Uh-huh,
But for those agencies and individuals who don't have access to SLMS,
It'll be an
we're
embedded.
working on the conversions. This will be the temporary measure until we have the full conversion. That has, I think, 6 sections in it. You have to answer the questions correctly before you can advance and get to the end and get credit for it.
I think
I'm
the issue is clear now.
understanding, yeah.
Now it's clear that this represents a diversion
right.
from what you have already
Okay.
approved.
I withdraw
temporary
my concern, and I'm happy to proceed to.
Pardon?
Okay.
It's a temporary.
Absolutely.
Right.
And what you had didn't withdraw your motion, right?
No, I didn't.
Second.
And I seconded it.
Yeah, that's, the motion having been duly made and seconded. I'll call for vote. Do you want to discuss it further?
Could we just have,
We can go.
for
I'm
whoever's
sorry.
taking the minutes, a clear articulation of what exactly the motion is? I'm not sure who does that.
Authorized to use,
My notes are that the two movements are authorizing staff to use this temporary alternative as a modality for delivering the on-demand ethics training.
Okay, great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, 3.
Did we lose? Oh,
No, they're both there, they raised.
okay,
Okay.
all right, all right. All right, we have one other matter of new business. And that is the executive director compensation. And this change is based upon the report of the Commission on Legislative, Judicial, and Executive Compensation. I'll ask our counsel to report on that.
So the commissioners, you've now been able to review the materials that were provided in the meeting book respecting agency or department head compensation increases pursuant to the recommendation of that legislative commission that were made effective January 1 of 2025. Consistent with prior action taken by this commission, the executive director's compensation has been equated to that of an agency head in the Tier A category. That Tier A category's compensation has been increased by the division of the budget, again, in compliance with the recommendation of that legislative commission to increase from $220,000 to $245,000.
And I guess we have a resolution.
And so the resolution before you is to effectuate that compensation increase and submit it to the Division of the Budget for processing.
So moved.
Commissioner Carvalho moves that we adopt that resolution. Is there a second?
Just a question, if I may. Why the division of budget as opposed
We need a
to,
second. We need a second for your discussion on the motion.
Second for discussion.
Okay.
sorry. Why would it go to, just out of curiosity, why would it go to the division of budget rather than the controller to pay?
Because the Division of the Budget the Division of the Budget has a process by which the budget director approves any salary increase or
And
award.
then it goes over?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then there is an OSC budget for it.
And there's what?
Controllers pull it in.
Okay, so.
All right, all in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution is adopted. Is there any other new business? There being no further business, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
A moved.
Edwards Austin.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.